The laughter hit her before the meaning did. Marin Ashford stood on the raised platform at the center of Lord Pemberton's ballroom. Borrowed silk flowers twisted through her dark hair, her mother's last good necklace warm against her throat. The chandelier light was too bright. The faces below were too many. And somewhere in the crowd, someone was calling out numbers. 15 shillings for the shopkeeper's daughter. 20. I'll take her for my stables. She looks sturdy enough. More laughter. A wave of it, rolling through the glittering assembly like poison dressed in perfume. Marin's mind raced backward, trying to understand. Tobias Finch had promised her this would be simple. His cousin needed extra ladies to fill out a charity event, he'd said. Just stand where they tell you, smile, and make polite conversation. A chance to rub shoulders with society, to make connections that might help her family's failing linen shop survive another season. No one had mentioned a stage. No one had mentioned an auction. 30 shillings! A ruddy-faced lord raised his glass, sloshing wine onto the woman beside him. Does she come with the dress, or do we return that after? The crowd roared. Marin's hands trembled at her sides. She searched the sea of faces for Tobias, for anyone who might explain what was happening, who might stop it. But she found only amusement, only the bright, cruel eyes of people who saw her humiliation as entertainment. At the edge of the platform, a woman in sapphire silk watched with particular satisfaction. Blonde curls arranged like a crown, lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. Lady Araminta Blackmore, Marin realized with sickening clarity. They'd been introduced earlier, briefly. Araminta had looked at Marin's dress, asked sweetly where she'd purchased it, then walked away laughing with her friends. This was her doing. 40 shillings, someone called. 45. The auctioneer, a nervous-looking man who seemed uncertain whether to continue, glanced toward the back of the room, as if seeking permission. Araminta gave a small nod. 45 shillings for the young lady, he stammered. Do I hear 50? Marin's vision blurred. She would not cry. She would not give them that satisfaction. She squared her shoulders, fixed her gaze on the far wall, and tried to imagine herself anywhere else. In her father's shop, folding linens. In her mother's kitchen, kneading bread. In the small garden behind their modest house, where no one looked at her like she was less than human. 50 shillings, the ruddy lord again, waving his hand with exaggerated enthusiasm. 100 pounds. The voice cut through the laughter like a blade through silk. Silence fell. Absolute, sudden, deafening silence. Marin's eyes found the speaker. He stood near the back of the room, half-shadowed by a marble column. Tall, dark-haired, dressed in evening clothes so perfectly tailored they could only belong to someone born to wealth. His face was unreadable, but his voice carried the unmistakable weight of authority. 100 pounds, he repeated, stepping forward into the light. For the lady's time this evening, her company at dinner, her first dance. Nothing more, nothing improper. Is that acceptable to the organizers of this charitable entertainment? The last words dripped with ice. Lady Araminta's smile had frozen on her face. The ruddy lord lowered his hand. The auctioneer looked like he might faint. That is, Your Grace, this was merely, Araminta began. Your Grace. The title crashed through Marin's awareness. This man who had just silenced a ballroom with 3 words was a duke, an actual duke, and he had just bid 100 pounds for the privilege of her company. Merely what, Lady Araminta? His voice was soft, but something dangerous lurked beneath it. Merely a jest? Merely a harmless diversion at a young woman's expense? Araminta's face flushed. It was all in good fun. No one meant any genuine harm. If Miss Ashworth cannot take a joke, Perhaps she shouldn't have attended an event above her station. Ashford, Marin heard herself say. Every head turned toward her. She hadn't meant to speak. The correction had simply emerged, pushed out by some stubborn core of pride that refused to surrender even now. She met the Duke's eyes, her heart hammering against her ribs. My name is Marin Ashford, not Ashworth. A flash of recognition crossed his face, there and gone in an instant. Miss Ashford, he inclined his head. Would you do me the honor of your company this evening? I believe my bid stands. Marin looked at the sea of stunned faces below her, at Lady Araminta, whose perfect composure was cracking, at the platform beneath her feet, where she'd stood as an object of mockery. Then she looked back at the Duke. The honor, she said, her voice steadier than she felt, would be mine, Your Grace. He moved through the crowd, which parted for him like water, and extended his hand to help her down from the platform. His grip was firm and warm, his palm calloused in a way that surprised her. Not the soft hands of a man who did nothing but attend parties. As her feet touched the ballroom floor, he leaned close enough that only she could hear. Smile, he murmured. They're watching, and you've just won. Make sure they know it. So Marin smiled, not the trembling, grateful smile of a woman rescued, but the sharp, satisfied smile of a woman vindicated. She placed her hand on his offered arm and let him lead her away from the platform, away from the whispers already erupting in their wake. Lady Araminta's voice followed them, brittle and bright. Your Grace, I do hope you'll save me a dance later. We discussed nothing, he said without turning. You presume much, Lady Araminta. A common failing, I've noticed. Marin heard the sharp intake of breath behind them, the rustle of shocked whispers. She didn't look back. The Duke guided her through a set of doors onto a moonlit terrace, and only when they were alone did he release her arm. You're shaking, he observed. I'm furious. The words came out hotter than she intended. That woman, they put me up there like I was livestock, like I was nothing. They're the ones who are nothing. His voice held quiet certainty. Cruelty is always a sign of emptiness. They proved it tonight, not you. Marin wanted to believe him, but the humiliation still burned in her chest, acid and sharp. Why did you do it? Why bid at all? You don't know me. I could be anyone. You could be. He leaned against the stone balustrade, moonlight catching the sharp angles of his face. But I know one thing about you already, Miss Ashford. What? When the entire room was laughing at your expense, you didn't crumble. You stood tall and refused to shrink. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. She stared at him, this stranger who spoke with such conviction. That's not an answer. You spent £100, a fortune. Why? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Because I couldn't stand there and watch it continue. Because Lady Araminta is a particular blight on London society, and someone needed to remind her that cruelty has consequences. Because... He stopped, shook his head. Because sometimes, he said finally, doing the right thing doesn't require reasons. It only requires action. Before Marin could respond, the terrace doors opened behind them. A young woman burst through, dark-haired and bright-eyed, practically vibrating with energy. Caspian, there you are. Everyone is talking about what you just did. It's glorious. Araminta looks like she swallowed a wasp. Who is this? Is this her? She's lovely. I'm Octavia, his sister, and I need to know absolutely everything. Caspian. The name settled into Marin's awareness as she processed the whirlwind of information that had just arrived in the form of his sister. Caspian and Octavia. A duke and his sibling, now standing on a moonlit terrace with a linen merchant's daughter, who had been publicly humiliated not 5 minutes ago. Octavia. The Duke's voice carried warning and affection in equal measure. Perhaps we might give Miss Ashford a moment to breathe before the interrogation begins. Breathing is overrated. Gossip is essential. Octavia grabbed both of Marin's hands, squeezing with genuine warmth. Tell me everything. How do you know Araminta? Why does she hate you? What did you do to end up on that ridiculous platform? I don't know her, Marin said, still reeling. We were introduced tonight, briefly. She asked about my dress, where I'd purchased it. I told her my mother had made it. She laughed and walked away. The next thing I knew, I was being led onto that stage for what I was told was a charitable presentation. I didn't realize I was the charity. Octavia's expression darkened. That vicious creature. This is exactly the kind of entertainment she finds amusing. Last season, she convinced Lady Pemberton's housemaid that she'd been invited to the winter ball, then had her removed by footmen in front of everyone. Octavia, Caspian said again, more firmly. What? Miss Ashford deserves to know what kind of snake she's dealing with. Octavia turned back to Marin. Araminta Blackmore has made cruelty an art form. She collects humiliations the way other women collect jewelry. The fact that Caspian publicly embarrassed her in return is the best thing that's happened all season. Marin looked between them, her mind struggling to keep pace. Why does she collect humiliations? What does she gain from it? Power, Caspian said quietly. Control. The illusion of superiority. Lady Araminta has spent years cultivating influence through fear. People don't cross her because they've seen what happens to those who do. And yet you crossed her tonight. I did. His gaze met hers, steady and direct. I don't particularly care what Lady Araminta thinks of me. She'll care what you did. Marin's stomach dropped. She won't let this go unanswered. You've made an enemy for my sake, and you don't even know me. I know enough. You know nothing. The words burst out, fueled by fear and frustration. You know I kept my composure while being mocked. That's one moment. One reaction. You don't know my family, my circumstances, what kind of person I actually am. You've just spent £100 and made a public enemy of a powerful woman, based on nothing but a single instant of observation. The quiet between them grew heavy. Octavia's eyebrows rose. Caspian studied Marin with an expression she couldn't read. You're right, he said finally. I acted on instinct, not information. That was perhaps reckless. Perhaps. Definitely reckless. The corner of his mouth twitched. But I find I don't regret it. Do you wish I hadn't intervened? Marin opened her mouth to say yes, to tell him she didn't need rescuing, that she could have survived the humiliation on her own. But the lie wouldn't come. No, she admitted quietly. I don't wish that. Then let's proceed from here. He straightened from the balustrade. You asked why I bid. The truth is more complicated than simple chivalry. Lady Araminta has been a thorn in my side for months. My grandmother favors her as a match, despite my protests. Tonight provided an opportunity to demonstrate publicly that I have no interest in such an arrangement. The words landed like stones in still water. You used me, Marin said slowly, to send a message. Yes. He didn't flinch from the admission. Though I would have intervened regardless, your usefulness to my situation was a secondary consideration. Caspian, Octavia hissed, perhaps a touch more delicacy. Miss Ashford doesn't strike me as someone who wants delicacy. She wants truth. He was right. She hated that he was right. What happens now? She asked. You've bid on my company for the evening. The evening will end. I'll return home. Lady Araminta will surely find ways to make my life miserable from a distance. And you'll continue being a duke with a grandmother who wants you to marry someone awful. Caspian exchanged a glance with Octavia. Something passed between them, the wordless communication of siblings who had spent a lifetime decoding each other. What if the evening didn't have to end? Octavia said. What if this arrangement continued? Marin stared at her. What do you mean? I mean my brother has been avoiding grandmother's matchmaking schemes for 2 years. Lady Araminta is her current favorite candidate, but she's not the first and won't be the last. Caspian keeps refusing. Grandmother keeps insisting, and the whole house is suffocating under the tension. I still don't understand what this has to do with me. Everything. Octavia's eyes sparkled with sudden enthusiasm. Don't you see? Tonight, my brother publicly chose you over Araminta. He bid an outrageous sum for your company, humiliated her in front of everyone, and then escorted you away like you were the most important woman in the room. By tomorrow morning, all of London will believe he's courting you. The terrace seemed to tilt beneath Marin's feet. That's absurd. It's perfect. Octavia grabbed her hands again. If Caspian is openly pursuing someone else, grandmother can't force Lady Araminta on him. She'll be furious, of course, but she can't argue with a public courtship. And by the end of the season, you can simply decide you don't suit. Part ways. No scandal, no harm done. No harm? Marin pulled her hands free. What about my reputation? What about my family? If I pretend to be courted by a duke, and then suddenly I'm not, people will assume I did something wrong. They'll whisper that I wasn't good enough, that I reached above my station and fell. We would manage the ending carefully, Caspian said. A mutual decision, handled with discretion. You'd emerge with your reputation intact. You can't guarantee that. No. He met her eyes. I can't. But I can guarantee that you'll spend the next several months living in comfort, attending the finest events in London, and being treated as though you belong. Lady Araminta's mockery tonight will be forgotten, replaced by the story of how you caught a duke's attention. That's not nothing, Miss Ashford. It wasn't nothing. It was everything. Marin thought of her father's shop, barely staying afloat, her mother's hands, rough and red from taking in extra mending, her brother Dorian's constant schemes to rescue the family through luck rather than labor. She thought of the tiny house they'd moved to after the business declined, the careful counting of every penny, and the constant weight of worry that pressed down on all of them. And she thought of the platform in that ballroom, the laughter, the numbers being called out like she was property. Why should I trust you? She asked. You've already admitted you used me tonight. How do I know this arrangement won't hurt me more than the humiliation would have? You don't. Caspian's honesty was relentless. Trust is earned, not guaranteed. But I give you my word that I will do everything in my power to protect your reputation and your interests. If at any point you wish to end the arrangement, it ends. No arguments, no complications. And if Lady Araminta tries to destroy me, his expression hardened, then she'll discover that making an enemy of me was the worst decision of her life. The words should have been theatrical. Instead, they sounded like a promise. The terrace doors opened again, and a footman appeared, his face carefully blank. Your Grace, the Dowager Duchess has arrived. She's asking for you. Caspian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course she is. Grandmother doesn't miss anything, Octavia murmured. Someone will have already sent word about what happened. Then she'll want to meet Miss Ashford immediately. Caspian turned to Marin. You don't have to decide anything tonight, but in approximately 3 minutes, my grandmother will walk through those doors expecting to assess the woman who just upended her carefully laid plans. Whatever you choose, you'll need to face her first. Marin's pulse thundered in her ears. And if I choose to leave? To go home and pretend tonight never happened? Then I'll have my carriage take you wherever you wish to go, and we'll never speak again. He paused. But Lady Araminta will still be out there, still vengeful, still powerful, and you'll have no shield against whatever retribution she decides to pursue. The doors opened again. This time, the woman who entered made the moonlight seem dim by comparison. Tall, silver-haired, dressed in black silk that somehow looked more regal than any color could. Her eyes found Marin immediately, sharp as cut glass. "So," the Dowager Duchess said, her voice carrying across the terrace like ice, "this is the girl who's caused all the commotion." The Dowager Duchess of Ashworth moved like someone who had never been denied anything in her life. She crossed the terrace with measured steps, her gaze cataloging every detail of Marin's appearance, dress, posture, and the way her hands wanted to tremble and were being forcibly kept still. "Grandmother," Caspian began. "Quiet." The single word silenced him. "I'll speak with Miss Ashford alone." Octavia made a small sound of protest, but Caspian touched her arm. They retreated through the terrace doors, leaving Marin alone with the most intimidating woman she had ever encountered. The Dowager circled her slowly. Marin stood still, refusing to flinch, meeting the older woman's gaze without wavering. The same posture that had caught the Duke's attention. She clung to it now like armor. "Your dress is homemade," the Dowager observed. "Competently done, but the fabric is last season's pattern. Your necklace is paste, though a decent imitation. Your hair was styled by someone with skill, but not professional training. Your mother, I presume?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Don't grovel. I despise groveling." The Dowager stopped in front of her. "My grandson just spent £100 and destroyed 2 years of my careful planning in a single impulsive gesture. I want to know why." "With respect, Your Grace, you should ask him that question, not me." Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "I'm asking you because Caspian will give me the answer he thinks I want to hear. You, Miss Ashford, have no such motivation. You have nothing to lose by telling me the truth." "I have everything to lose." Marin's voice came out steadier than she expected. "I was put on that stage as a joke. Your grandson intervened. I don't know why, not truly. He's given me reasons, but I can't verify their sincerity. All I know is that 5 minutes ago, I was being auctioned like livestock, and now I'm standing on a terrace being interrogated by a Dowager Duchess. Neither situation is one I chose." The Dowager's lips thinned. "You're impertinent." "I'm honest. You said you despise groveling." Neither spoke. The moment lengthened, sharp and dangerous. Then, unexpectedly, the Dowager laughed, a short bark of genuine amusement. "Eloise," she said, extending her hand as if they were equals, "since we appear to be dispensing with formalities." Marin took the offered hand, bewildered. "Marin Ashford." "Yes, I gathered. Now, Miss Ashford, let me be direct. My grandson has complicated my plans considerably tonight. Lady Araminta Blackmore was meant to become his duchess. She's wealthy, connected, and appropriately biddable. Everything a duke's wife should be. She's also cruel, Marin heard herself say. She put me on that platform for entertainment. She watches people suffer and calls it humor. Yes. The Dowager's expression didn't change. She's also those things. But cruelty in a duchess is not disqualifying, merely inconvenient. Marin stared at her. You would have married your grandson to a woman you know is cruel. I would have married my grandson to a woman who could secure the Ashworth legacy for another generation. Love is a luxury. Duty is what matters. The Dowager's voice hardened. My son, Caspian's father, died 18 months ago. Heart failure. Sudden, unexpected. Caspian was in Cornwall settling a land dispute and didn't return in time to say goodbye. He's been somewhere else ever since. Present in body, absent in spirit. going through the motions of his responsibilities without actually living. The words landed with unexpected weight. Marin thought of the Duke's careful composure, the controlled precision of his movements, the way he observed everything without seeming to feel anything. "I want him to marry," the Dowager continued, "not merely for heirs, though those are necessary. I want him to feel something again, to be anchored to life by more than obligation. Lady Araminta would never have accomplished that. She's too empty herself to fill anyone else. Then why push the match? Because he refused to choose for himself, and an indifferent marriage is better than no marriage at all." The Dowager's gaze sharpened. "But now you've appeared, an unknown variable, a disruption to my careful planning. Tell me, Miss Ashford, what exactly do you intend to do with my grandson's attention?" Marin's breath caught. "I haven't decided yet. Haven't decided." The Dowager's tone could have frozen fire. "My grandson publicly chose you over the woman I selected. By morning, all of London will assume he's courting you. Invitations will arrive. Expectations will build. And you haven't decided? I was put up for auction an hour ago." Marin's voice rose. "I came to this event believing I was doing a favor for an acquaintance. Instead, I was humiliated in front of hundreds of people. Then your grandson intervened, brought me out here, and proposed that I pretend to be courted by him for the rest of the season. And now you're demanding to know my intentions?" "I don't have intentions, Your Grace. I have confusion and exhaustion, and the growing suspicion that nothing about tonight has been what it seemed." The Dowager studied her for a long moment. "You're frightened?" "Yes." "Good. Fear means you understand the stakes." She moved toward the balustrade, looking out over the moonlit garden. "Let me tell you what will happen if you refuse Caspian's arrangement. You'll return home tonight. Tomorrow, Lady Araminta will begin her retribution. She has influence with merchants, landlords, and the tradespeople who keep your family's shop supplied. Within a month, your business will fail entirely. Within 2, your family will be destitute." Dread pooled in Marin's gut. "You can't know that. I know Araminta. I've watched her destroy others for smaller offenses than being the object of my grandson's public attention." The Dowager turned back to face her. "Alternatively, you accept the arrangement. You spend the season as Octavia's guest at Ashworth House. You attend balls and dinners on Caspian's arm. Araminta can't touch you while you're under our protection. And at the end of the season, we engineer a graceful conclusion. You emerge with connections, references, and the reputation of a woman who was courted by a duke, but chose independence. And if I fail, if I can't maintain the pretense, then you fail, but at least you'll have tried." The Dowager's voice softened almost imperceptibly. "I'm not offering you a fairy tale, Miss Ashford. I'm offering you a chance. What you do with it is your choice." The terrace doors opened, and Caspian returned alone, his expression guarded. "Grandmother, perhaps we might conclude this interrogation inside. The night is growing cold." "We're finishing now." The Dowager gestured toward Marin. "Miss Ashford is considering your proposal. I've provided additional context." "I'm sure you have." His tone was dry. "Threats or inducements?" "Both. I'm efficient." Caspian moved to stand beside Marin, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the warmth of his presence. "Whatever she told you, whatever pressure she applied, the choice remains yours. I meant what I said. If you want to leave, you leave. No consequences from me." "There will be consequences from Araminta," the Dowager said flatly. "We've established that." "Grandmother?" "He knows it's true." The older woman's gaze fixed on Marin. "You have until morning to decide. We'll be attending Lady Worthington's garden party tomorrow afternoon. If you arrive at Ashworth House by noon, I'll know you've accepted. If not, I'll know you've chosen differently. Either way, I wish you well, Miss Ashford. You have more spine than I expected." She swept back through the terrace doors without another word. Marin exhaled slowly, her whole body trembling. "Your grandmother is terrifying. She grows on you." Caspian's voice held wry affection. "Eventually, after several years." "I don't have several years. I have until morning." Marin turned to face him. "If I do this, if I accept your arrangement, I need conditions." His eyebrows rose. "Conditions? You said yourself that trust is earned. I don't know you, Your Grace. I don't know your family, your household, and your expectations. If I'm going to walk into your world and pretend to belong there, I need protections." "Name them." The readiness of his response steadied her. "First, my family receives immediate assistance, not charity, employment. My mother is an excellent seamstress. My father knows textiles better than anyone in London. My brother needs direction, not schemes. Find them work, real work, so they're not dependent on whether our ruse succeeds or fails." Caspian nodded slowly. "That can be arranged. Second, I want written references from both you and Lady Octavia at the end of the season. Letters of introduction that will help me secure a position as a companion or governess. Not your household. Somewhere I can build my own life. You're planning your escape before you've even arrived. I'm ensuring I have somewhere to go when this ends, because it will end, Your Grace. You've said so yourself." He studied her with those unreadable eyes. "What's your third condition?" "Honesty." Marin held his gaze. "If you decide you actually want to marry someone, whether it's Lady Araminta or anyone else, you tell me immediately. I won't be used as a shield while you conduct a real courtship on the side. I may be poor, but I won't be made a fool. You think I would do that?" "I think I don't know what you would do. That's the point." She stood taller. "Those are my conditions. Do we have an agreement, or do I walk away tonight?" Caspian was silent for a long moment. The moonlight caught the sharp planes of his face, the tension in his jaw, and the unreadable depths in his eyes that she still couldn't name. "Your family will receive positions before the week is out," he said finally. "You'll have your letters of introduction, written by myself, Octavia, and my grandmother, whether she likes it or not. And you have my word, Miss Ashford. I will not court anyone else while this arrangement stands. When it ends honestly." He extended his hand. Marin looked at his outstretched palm, the hand that had helped her down from that humiliating platform, the hand that had just sealed a bargain that would change everything about her life. She took it. His grip was warm, firm, and somehow final. A door closing and opening simultaneously. "Then I'll see you tomorrow," she said. "Noon. Ashworth House. I'll send a carriage. I'll find my own way." She released his hand. "If I'm going to walk into your world, I'd rather do it on my own 2 feet." His expression betrayed a moment of surprise, perhaps even respect. "As you wish, Miss Ashford." She turned and walked back toward the ballroom, where she would find Tobias Finch and demand explanations, where whispers would follow her every step, where Lady Araminta was certainly watching from somewhere with fury in her perfect eyes. But Marin didn't look for any of them. She walked straight through the crowd, out the front entrance, and into the London night. Tomorrow, everything would change. And for the first time in years, she wasn't entirely afraid of what that change might bring. Ashworth House rose from the morning mist like a castle from a fever dream. Marin stood at the iron gates, her single carpet bag clutched in both hands, staring up at the cream-colored facade with its endless windows and columned entrance. She had walked from Cheapside, nearly 2 hours through London's crowded streets, because she'd meant what she said about arriving on her own 2 feet. Now those feet refused to move. The house was enormous. 3 stories of elegant Georgian architecture, surrounded by manicured gardens visible through the gates, a circular drive leading to doors that probably cost more than her family's entire shop. Footmen in matching livery stood at attention, watching her with carefully neutral expressions. She didn't belong here. The thought struck with such force that she nearly turned around. What was she doing? Playing pretend with dukes and dowager duchesses. She was a linen merchant's daughter. Her hands knew the weight of fabric bolts, the scratch of inventory ledgers, the ache of standing behind a counter for 12 hours. They didn't know how to hold crystal glasses or gesture elegantly at garden parties. Miss Ashford, a young woman appeared at the gate, red hair tucked under a cap, freckles scattered across a friendly face. She curtsied quickly. "I'm Bridget, miss. Lady Octavia sent me to watch for you. She said you might need a moment before coming inside." Marin blinked. She knew I'd hesitate? She said anyone sensible would. Bridget's smile was warm. It's a lot to take in, the house. Even I still get lost sometimes, and I've worked here 2 years. But it's not so frightening once you're inside. Just rooms and hallways, stone and wood, nothing that bites. Despite everything, Marin felt her lips twitch. Nothing that bites. Well, Bridget's eyes sparkled. The Dowager Duchess can be sharp, but she's more bark than bite once you know her. And His Grace is kind, truly. Quiet, but kind. He remembers all our names, asks after our families. Not all lords do that. The small detail lodged itself in Marin's chest. A duke who remembered servants' names, who asked about their families. "Thank you, Bridget." Marin straightened her shoulders. "I suppose I should stop hovering at the gate like a lost cat. I've seen lost cats with more confidence, miss, if you'll forgive my saying so." Marin laughed. A real laugh. The first since before the auction. "Forgiven. Lead the way." Inside, Ashworth House was even more overwhelming than its exterior suggested. Marble floors stretched in every direction, reflecting light from chandeliers that dripped with crystal. Portraits lined the walls, generations of Ashworth ancestors gazing down with varying degrees of approval. A grand staircase swept upward to regions unknown, carpeted in deep blue that matched the family crest displayed above the entrance. Bridget led her through corridors that seemed endless, past drawing rooms and morning rooms, and a library whose book-lined walls made Marin's heart ache with longing. Finally, they climbed a secondary staircase to the guest wing. "The Willow Suite," Bridget announced, opening a door to reveal rooms larger than Marin's entire house. A sitting room led to a bedroom, led to a dressing room, led to a private bathing chamber. The walls were papered in soft sage green, white willows trailing across the pattern. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases. A fire already crackled in the hearth, warming air that smelled of lavender and beeswax. "This is mine?" Marin's voice came out strangled. "For as long as you're with us, miss." Bridget moved efficiently around the space, opening curtains, adjusting pillows. "Lady Octavia had clothes sent up from Madame Laurent this morning. Temporary," she said, "until your proper wardrobe arrives. There's tea on the table, and lunch will be served in the small dining room at 1. Her ladyship asked that you rest first. You've had quite a journey." Rest. As if Marin could rest surrounded by silk hangings and velvet chairs, and more luxury than she'd ever imagined. "Thank you," she managed, "for everything." Bridget curtsied and departed, leaving Marin alone with her single carpet bag and a life that had somehow transformed overnight. She moved through the rooms slowly, touching surfaces that felt too fine for her roughened fingers. The wardrobe contained more dresses than she'd owned in her entire life, all in sizes that appeared to be hers, in colors she would never have chosen, but that somehow seemed perfect. Soft blues and muted roses, sage greens and cream whites. Fabrics that whispered against her skin when she dared to feel them. In the dressing table drawer, she found hairpins of actual silver, ribbons of satin, a small pot of rouge that cost more than a week's food for her family. Her family. The thought struck like a blow. Her mother would be frantic by now, wondering where she'd gone. Maren had left a note, brief and inadequate, saying only that an opportunity had arisen and she would send word soon. But her mother would worry. Her mother always worried. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in." Octavia burst through like a summer storm, all energy and enthusiasm, and absolutely no regard for propriety. "You're here. You actually came. I told Caspian you would, but he wasn't certain. He said you seemed the type to reconsider in the harsh light of morning. Clearly he underestimates you." Clearly. Maren found herself smiling despite her nerves. "Though I nearly turned around at the gate," Bridget mentioned. Octavia threw herself onto the settee with cheerful abandon. "She also mentioned you walked here, from Cheapside. That's nearly 3 miles. I wanted to think. And what did you think?" Maren considered the question. "That I'm either very brave or very foolish, possibly both. The best decisions are always both." Octavia patted the seat beside her. "Sit. We have much to discuss before the garden party this afternoon. Grandmother is already planning your introduction to society, and trust me, you want to be prepared." Maren sat, her borrowed dress rustling against the velvet cushions. "What kind of preparation?" "The survival kind." Octavia's expression grew more serious. "Lady Worthington's garden party will be full of people who saw what happened last night. Some will be curious, some sympathetic, many hostile. Lady Araminta will certainly be there, sharpening her claws. You'll need armor." "I don't have armor. I have a merchant's wit and a stubborn refusal to crumble." "Those are excellent starts." Octavia squeezed her hand. "We'll build from there. Now tell me everything about yourself. Not the facts grandmother already extracted, the real things. What makes you laugh? What makes you furious? What do you dream about when no one's watching?" The questions were unexpected, intimate, nothing like the interrogation Maren had anticipated. She found herself answering honestly, telling Octavia about her father's shop and the smell of fresh linen, about her mother's quiet strength and endless worry, about her brother Dorian's schemes, and her own dreams of something more, something different, something she'd never been able to name. Octavia listened without interruption, her bright eyes softening with each revelation. "You're not what they'll expect," she said finally. "That's going to be your greatest weapon." "What do they expect?" "A fortune hunter, a social climber, someone desperate and grasping and easily dismissed." Octavia's smile turned sharp. "Show them something else, and you'll unbalance everyone who thought they knew how this story would go." Before Maren could respond, a clock somewhere in the house chimed the hour. Octavia leaped up. "Noon already. The garden party starts at 3. We have barely enough time to make you magnificent." She pulled Maren toward the dressing room. "Bridget, we need reinforcements, and someone fetch Madame Laurent. Miss Ashford requires armor, and we're going to give her the finest kind." The whirlwind began. The Dowager Duchess found Maren in the gallery. It was 2 o'clock, 1 hour before the garden party, and Maren had escaped the chaos of preparations to wander through the house. The gallery had called to her, a long corridor lined with portraits and landscapes, quieter than the rest of Ashworth House, thick carpets muffling every sound. She was studying a painting of a woman in blue silk, dark-haired and laughing, when she heard the measured footsteps behind her. That was Caspian's mother. Maren turned. The dowager stood silhouetted against the light from a tall window, her black silk dress making her look like a shadow given form. She was beautiful, Maren said carefully. She was irritating. The dowager moved closer, her gaze fixed on the portrait. Vivienne, a French merchant's daughter, if you can believe it. My son met her in Paris and lost his senses entirely. Brought her home like a stray cat and announced he intended to marry her. Marin's breath caught. A merchant's daughter? Don't look so hopeful. The circumstances were entirely different. The dowager's voice was dry. Vivienne's father was one of the wealthiest silk traders in Europe. She brought a fortune to the marriage, not merely a pretty face. But yes, she was not what I had planned for my son. Not remotely. What had you planned? A duke's daughter, a marquess's sister, someone bred for the position, trained from birth to manage a great house and produce acceptable heirs. The dowager's lips thinned. Instead, I got Vivienne, who laughed too loudly and said exactly what she thought, and somehow made my rigid, proper son laugh along with her. Marin studied the portrait with new eyes. The woman's smile held mischief, joy, a refusal to be contained. You didn't approve. I was furious. For the first 5 years of their marriage, I barely spoke to either of them. The dowager's voice held no emotion, but her hands were clasped tightly together. Then Caspian was born, and then Octavia. And somewhere in watching my grandchildren grow, I realized that Vivienne had given my son something I never could have. What was that? Happiness. The word came out like a confession. Real happiness. Not duty satisfied or obligations met, but actual joy. He smiled when she entered a room. He held her hand at dinner, like they were still courting. He was present, in a way he'd never been before. Marin thought of what the dowager had said on the terrace. Present in body, absent in spirit. What happened to her? She died giving birth to their third child. The baby died as well. The dowager's voice remained steady, but something cracked beneath the surface. My son survived another 12 years, but he was never the same. He went through the motions of living, managed the estates competently enough, but the light had gone out of him. When his heart failed 18 months ago, I think part of him was relieved. The gallery felt very cold suddenly. Marin wrapped her arms around herself. Why are you telling me this? The dowager turned to face her fully. Because Caspian is his father's son. He loved deeply as a child, felt everything too intensely. When his mother died, something in him closed off. When his father died, what little remained retreated further. He performs his duties now. He manages his responsibilities, but he doesn't feel anything. That's not true. The words escaped before Marin could stop them. Last night, at the auction, he was furious. I could see it. The way he looked at Lady Araminta, the way he spoke to her, that wasn't performance. That was real. The dowager's eyes narrowed with sudden interest. You saw that? It was obvious, at least to me. An unreadable expression passed through her gaze. Interesting. Your Grace, I still don't understand why you're telling me about his parents. I'm not here to heal your grandson. I'm here to play a role for a few months, and then disappear. Are you? The dowager's voice was soft. Is that truly what you believe will happen? A knot formed in Marin's chest. It's what was agreed. Agreements change. People change. Circumstances change. The dowager moved closer, her gaze piercing. I watched my son fall in love with an unsuitable woman and spent 20 years in happiness, followed by 12 years of grief. I watched my grandson learn from that example that loving someone means losing them. And now you've appeared, a merchant's daughter with more spine than sense. And my grandson has done something impulsive for the first time since his father's funeral. The bid was strategic. He said so himself. Strategic? The Dowager laughed, a harsh sound. Caspian has had dozens of opportunities to publicly rebuff Lady Araminta. He's chosen restraint every time. Last night, he chose spectacle. He chose you. That wasn't strategy, Miss Ashford. That was instinct. Marin shook her head. You're reading too much into a single moment. Perhaps. Or perhaps you're refusing to see what's obvious. The Dowager stepped back. I'm not offering you my blessing, Miss Ashford. You haven't earned that yet. I'm offering you information. My grandson is more fragile than he appears. He's built walls around himself so thick that most people never see past them. If you can't reach him, this arrangement will end exactly as you expect. Quiet, clean, forgettable. But if you can— She trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. If I can? What? Marin pressed. Then you might discover that some arrangements have the power to become something else entirely. The Dowager turned toward the door. The carriage leaves in 45 minutes. I suggest you finish preparing. Lady Worthington's garden parties are battlefields disguised as picnics, and you'll need every weapon at your disposal. She departed, her black silk whispering against the marble floors, leaving Marin alone with the portrait of a merchant's daughter who had somehow captured a duke's heart. Vivian's painted eyes seemed to hold a question. Marin didn't have an answer. She returned to the Willow Suite to find Octavia directing a small army of maids, all of them arranging and adjusting and perfecting. The dress they'd chosen was a soft rose pink, elegant but not ostentatious, the kind of gown that said, I belong here, without saying I'm trying too hard. There you are. Octavia pulled her toward the dressing table. Where did you disappear to? Never mind. It doesn't matter. We have 30 minutes to turn you into someone Lady Araminta will choke on. I was in the gallery. Your grandmother found me. Octavia's hand stilled in Marin's hair. And? She told me about your mother, your parents, the merchant's daughter who married the Duke's son. Silence fell over the room. The maids exchanged glances and quietly withdrew. She told you about Vivian? Octavia's voice was strange. She never talks about Vivian. Not to anyone. Maybe she thought I needed to understand something. Understand what? Marin met Octavia's eyes in the mirror. That your brother isn't as cold as he pretends to be. That underneath all that control, there's someone who's afraid to feel anything, because feeling things means losing them. Octavia's expression crumpled, just for a moment, before she rebuilt it. She's not wrong. Caspian was different before Father died. Warmer, more present. Now he's like a statue that walks and talks and manages estates. Sometimes I want to shake him until something cracks. Maybe something already has. What do you mean? Marin thought of the terrace, of the Duke's voice cutting through the auction's cruelty, of the fury she'd seen beneath his controlled surface. I think your grandmother believes I might be the something that cracks him open. She's not sure if that's good or bad, but she wanted me to know it was possible. Octavia stared at her for a long moment. Then she smiled, slow and conspiratorial. Well then, she said, picking up a hairpin, let's make sure you're ready for anything, including the impossible. The garden party was a battlefield draped in bunting. Lady Worthington's estate spread across several acres of manicured perfection, with striped pavilions dotting the lawn, and servants circulating with champagne and delicate pastries. Everywhere Marin looked, she saw silk and jewels and careful smiles that never quite reached the eyes. She stepped down from the Ashworth carriage and felt every gaze turn toward her. The whispers began immediately. That's her, the auction girl. Can you believe she actually came? The Duke must have lost his mind. Look at that dress, obviously new, obviously purchased for her. How long before he tires of this little charity project? Maren kept her posture tall and her expression steady. She was wearing armor now, pink silk and silver hairpins, and the quiet confidence Octavia had spent the afternoon drilling into her. "Remember," Octavia murmured beside her, "you're not seeking their approval. You're granting them the privilege of your presence. There's a difference. That seems arrogant." "It is. That's the point. Arrogance is the only currency these people respect." Caspian appeared at Maren's other side, offering his arm. He was dressed in afternoon attire that probably cost more than her family's shop earned in a month, his dark hair perfectly arranged, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Ashford." His voice was formal, but his eyes held something warmer. "You look well. You look appropriate." She threw his words from the ball back at him. His lips twitched. "Touché." They moved through the crowd together, a triad of Ashworth power protecting their unexpected guest. Introductions blurred together. Lady this, Lord that, the Earl of somewhere important. Maren smiled and curtsied and said all the right things, drawing on years of her mother's careful instruction in manners and deportment. Just because they weren't wealthy didn't mean they were ignorant of how to behave. Several people expressed polite curiosity about her friendship with Octavia. She gave the prepared story, embellished slightly with details Octavia had coached her on. A chance meeting at a charity event in the north, correspondence ever since, an invitation to London for the season. It was thin, but it was consistent, and Maren delivered it with such calm certainty that most seemed to accept it. Lady Araminta found them near the refreshment tent. She was even more beautiful in daylight, her blonde curls catching the sun, her pale blue dress the exact color of a winter sky. She moved through the crowd like a queen approaching subjects, her smile sharp enough to cut. "Your Grace." She curtsied to Caspian with exaggerated deference. "How wonderful to see you. And Miss Ashford, wasn't it? How brave of you to attend after last night's excitement." "I'm not certain bravery was required." Maren kept her voice pleasant. "Simply a carriage and an invitation." Araminta's smile tightened. "Of course. Though one would think, after being made such a spectacle, you might prefer to withdraw from society for a time. Recover from the embarrassment. No one would blame you." "Embarrassment?" Maren tilted her head. "I'm afraid I don't follow. I was invited to an event. I attended. A charitable auction occurred. His Grace made a generous bid. I fail to see what's embarrassing about any of that." The lie was smooth, almost convincing. Araminta's eyes narrowed. "You're claiming you weren't humiliated? That being put on that platform was part of your plan?" "I'm claiming that humiliation requires one to feel humiliated." Maren smiled, letting steel enter her voice. "And I don't." Octavia made a small sound that might have been a laugh disguised as a cough. Caspian's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on Maren's arm. "How resilient of you." Araminta's composure was cracking. "I do hope that resilience lasts. London society can be quite unforgiving to those who don't know their place." "I know my place perfectly well, Lady Araminta. It's right here, enjoying this lovely garden party. Where is your place, I wonder?" The question landed like a slap. Several nearby guests turned to watch, their expressions hungry for drama. Araminta's face flushed. "You overstep, Miss Ashford." "Do I? Forgive me. I'm still learning the rules of your world." Maren's smile didn't waver. "Perhaps you could teach me. You seem so very experienced at putting people in their places." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Caspian stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "Lady Araminta, I believe your mother is looking for you. Near the East Pavilion." It was a dismissal, clear and unmistakable. Araminta's face went white, then red, then settled into a mask of controlled fury. "Of course, Your Grace," she curtsied stiffly. "Miss Ashford, we'll speak again soon." "I look forward to it." Araminta departed, her perfect posture betraying nothing of her rage. But Marin had seen the promise in her eyes. This wasn't over. It was barely beginning. That, Octavia breathed, was magnificent. Did you see her face? I thought she might spontaneously combust. "You've made an enemy," Caspian said quietly. "A dedicated one. I had an enemy already. Now I've simply shown her I won't be easy prey." Marin looked up at him. "Is that not what you wanted? A woman who could hold her own?" A crack appeared in his careful composure. "It's exactly what I wanted." The afternoon continued. More introductions, more careful conversations, more smiles that felt like performances. But something had shifted. People who had watched Marin with dismissive amusement now watched her with wary respect. She had drawn blood from Lady Araminta Blackmore, and that wasn't nothing. By the time the garden party ended, Marin's feet ached, and her face hurt from smiling, but she felt something she hadn't expected. Victory. Small, temporary, possibly meaningless, but victory nonetheless. In the carriage back to Ashworth House, Octavia chattered enthusiastically about every moment, every slight, and every triumph. The Dowager sat in silence, her expression unreadable but not disapproving. And Caspian watched Marin with those careful blue eyes, seeing something she wasn't sure she wanted him to see. "You did well today," he said finally. "I survived." "Survival in that world is doing well." He leaned back against the carriage seat. "Tomorrow we attend the Whitmore Ball. Larger crowd, higher stakes. Are you prepared?" Marin thought of Araminta's promise of future confrontation, of the whispers that would spread through London tonight, of everything that could go wrong, and probably would. "I'll be prepared," she said, "whatever that requires." His gaze held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "I believe you will be." The carriage rolled on through the darkening streets, carrying them back to Ashworth House, back to the strange new life Marin was building one careful step at a time. Tomorrow was the ball. Tomorrow, everything would escalate. She would be ready. The Whitmore Ball was everything the garden party had been, magnified 100-fold. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, their light fracturing into 1,000 rainbows across the marble floor. An orchestra played from a raised dais, filling the cavernous ballroom with music that seemed to pulse in time with Marin's racing heart. And everywhere were people watching. She descended the grand staircase on Caspian's arm, wearing a gown of midnight blue that Madame Laurent had delivered that morning with a note. For making Araminta Blackmore turn that particular shade of red. With admiration. "They're staring," Marin murmured. "They're always staring." Caspian's voice was low, meant only for her. Tonight, let them see something worth watching. The evening began well enough. Marin danced the first waltz with Caspian, their movements synchronized in a way that surprised her. His hand at her waist was warm, steady, guiding her through turns and spins without a single misstep. "You dance well," he said, something like surprise in his voice. "My mother taught me. She said a woman should always know how to dance, even if she never gets the chance. She sounds wise. She is." Marin's throat tightened. "I miss her. Even though I've only been gone 2 days, I miss her. We can arrange a visit. Tomorrow, if you like." The offer was unexpected, generous in a way that didn't fit the cold duke everyone seemed to believe he was. "You would do that?" "You're not a prisoner, Miss Ashford. You're a guest." Before she could respond, the waltz ended. Caspian bowed over her hand, his lips brushing her gloved knuckles in a gesture that sent heat flooding through her chest. Then he released her, and the evening continued. Other partners claimed her attention. Young lords who asked too many questions. Older gentlemen who looked at her with barely concealed speculation. Marin smiled and deflected and counted the minutes until she could return to Caspian's side. She found Octavia near the refreshment table, her face flushed with champagne and excitement. "You're doing wonderfully," Octavia whispered. "Lady Pemberton told me she thinks you're charming. Lady Pemberton never thinks anyone is charming. Small victories. The best kind." Octavia squeezed her hand. "Now, fair warning. Lady Araminta has been circulating all evening, speaking to everyone who'll listen. I don't know what she's planning, but she's planning something." As if summoned by her name, Araminta appeared at the edge of the dance floor. She was surrounded by a cluster of young women, all of them watching Marin with expressions that ranged from pitying to predatory. "Miss Ashford," Araminta's voice carried across the space between them. "I've just been telling my friends about your family's shop. Linens, isn't it? How quaint. Do you fold the fabric yourself, or do you have servants for that?" Laughter rippled through the surrounding crowd. Marin felt her face heat, but she kept her voice steady. "We fold it ourselves, Lady Araminta. It's honest work. Perhaps you've heard of the concept." The laughter died. Araminta's eyes narrowed. "Honest work," she repeated. "How novel. And is it honest work, Miss Ashford, to pretend you're something you're not? To wear borrowed finery and dance with dukes as if you belonged among them?" "I'm not pretending to be anything." Marin stepped forward, refusing to retreat. "I'm a merchant's daughter attending a ball. What are you pretending to be, Lady Araminta? Because from where I stand, you look like someone desperately afraid of being forgotten." The gasp that went through the crowd was audible. Araminta's composure shattered. Her face went white, then mottled red, her perfect features twisting with fury. "You think you've won something?" she hissed. "You think because a duke paid attention to you once, you matter. But you're nothing. You'll always be nothing. And when he tires of his little charity project, you'll crawl back to your shop and your linens and your pathetic little life, and no one will remember your name." The words hit like physical blows. Marin felt them land, felt them bruise, felt the truth in them even as she fought against it. Then a voice cut through the silence. "I'll remember her name." Caspian materialized at Marin's side, his expression carved from ice. He didn't look at Araminta. His entire focus was on Marin, his hand finding hers and gripping tight. "I'll remember her name," he repeated, louder this time, addressing the watching crowd. "Because Miss Ashford is worth remembering. Because she has more courage in her smallest finger than most people accumulate in a lifetime. And because anyone who insults her insults me." The ballroom fell utterly silent. Caspian turned to Araminta at last, his voice dropping to something soft and deadly. "You've made yourself quite clear this evening, Lady Araminta. So let me make myself equally clear. You are not welcome at any function where Miss Ashford or my family will be present. Your invitations will cease. Your influence will wane. And if I hear that you've spoken so much as a single word against her, I will ensure that the only parties you attend are the ones held by people too insignificant to know better." Araminta's mouth opened and closed. No sound emerged. "Good evening, Lady Araminta." Caspian turned away from her, dismissing her entirely. "Miss Ashford, would you care for some air? This ballroom has become rather stifling." He led Marin through the crowd, which parted like the Red Sea before them. Behind them, Marin could hear the whispers exploding, but she couldn't bring herself to care. They reached a terrace overlooking a darkened garden. The night air was cool against Marin's flushed skin, a welcome relief from the stuffy ballroom. Music drifted through the open doors, but out here it was muted, dreamlike. "You shouldn't have done that," she said when she could finally speak. "Done what?" "Defended me so publicly. Made an enemy of her so completely. She'll never forgive you." "I don't require her forgiveness." Caspian leaned against the stone balustrade, his face half-shadowed. "She attacked you. I responded. That's the end of it." "It's not the end of anything. It's the beginning." Marin pressed her hands to her temples. "Don't you see? Before, this was a game, a temporary arrangement. Now you've made it personal. Now everyone in that ballroom thinks you actually care about me. Perhaps I do." The words hung between them, electric and terrifying. "Don't say that." Marin's voice cracked. "Don't pretend this is something it isn't." "I'm not pretending anything." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. "I defended you because you deserved to be defended. Because watching her attack, you made me feel something I haven't felt in years. Fury, yes, but also protectiveness, possessiveness. Things I have no right to feel for a woman I hired to play a role." Marin's pulse quickened. "Caspian, that's the first time you've used my name." "Is it?" "Yes." His hand lifted, almost touching her face, then dropped. "I'm not asking for anything, Marin. I'm just telling you the truth, because I promised you honesty, and this is what honesty looks like." Before she could respond, before she could even process, the terrace doors opened behind them. Octavia's face was pale in the lamplight. "You need to come inside. Grandmother's had a spell. The doctors have been sent for." The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of worry and waiting. The Dowager Duchess had collapsed shortly after Caspian's confrontation with Araminta, her heart seizing in her chest. The doctors came and went, speaking in hushed tones about strain and age and the importance of rest. She survived the first night, then the second, but remained confined to her chambers, too weak to receive visitors. Marin retreated to the edges of the crisis, trying to make herself useful without intruding. She helped Octavia manage the household. When the younger woman became overwhelmed, she turned away visitors who came to gawk under the pretense of concern. She sat in the library for hours, reading without absorbing a single word, and she avoided Caspian entirely. It wasn't difficult. He spent most of his time in his grandmother's chambers, or locked in his study, emerging only for brief updates that he delivered to Octavia with hollow eyes and a voice stripped of all emotion. The controlled Duke was back. Whatever had cracked open on that terrace had sealed itself shut. On the 4th morning, Marin found a package on the table in her sitting room. It was wrapped in brown paper, no card attached, nothing to indicate its origin. She opened it carefully. Inside was a book. Old, leather-bound, its pages worn soft with age. The title was stamped in faded gold, Songs of the Northern Hills, a collection of folk tales and ballads from the region where Marin had grown up, stories her mother had told her as a child. She opened the cover and found an inscription in handwriting she didn't recognize. "For the woman who reminded me that courage comes in many forms. These are the stories of your people. I thought you might want something familiar in an unfamiliar place. No signature." But Marin knew who had sent it. She sat down heavily, the book pressed to her chest, and tried to understand what she was feeling. Gratitude, certainly. Confusion. Something warmer and more dangerous that she didn't want to name. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss, His Grace is asking for you. In the library." Marin's chest tightened. "Is something wrong?" "The Dowager?" "No, miss. Her Grace is resting comfortably. But His Grace—" Bridget hesitated. "He's been in there since before dawn. He won't eat, won't sleep. Lady Octavia's worried." Marin tucked the book carefully into her desk drawer and followed Bridget to the library. She found Caspian standing at the window, his silhouette dark against the gray morning light. He didn't turn when she entered. "Close the door." She did. Words failed them both. The quiet grew heavy with everything unsaid. "You've been avoiding me," he said finally. "You've been busy. With your grandmother, with the household. I didn't want to intrude." "You're not an intrusion." He turned at last, and Marin's breath caught. He looked terrible, exhausted, haunted, the carefully maintained control fraying at every edge. "You're the only person in this house who doesn't look at me like I might shatter." "Maybe you should shatter." The words escaped before she could stop them. "Maybe that would be better than holding everything together until it destroys you." His eyes betrayed a moment of vulnerability. Pain, perhaps, or recognition. "My father shattered when my mother died." His voice was raw. "I watched him fall apart for months. Then I watched him put himself back together wrong, piece by piece, until he was someone I barely recognized. I swore I would never do that. I swore I would stay in control no matter what." "And how's that working for you?" The question landed like a blow. Caspian flinched. "It's killing me." The confession came out barely above a whisper. "I feel everything, Marin. Every moment of every day. But I can't let it out. Because if I do, if I let even one crack appear, I'm afraid everything will flood through and I'll drown." Marin crossed the room to stand before him. She didn't touch him, didn't dare, but she was close enough to see the moisture gathering in his eyes, the tremor in his hands. "Your grandmother is still alive," she said softly. "She's fighting. She's not gone yet. But she will be, eventually. Everyone leaves eventually." "Yes." Marin's throat tightened. "They do. But that doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you love them harder, while you can. It means you let them see who you really are before it is too late." "Who I really am." His laugh was bitter. "I don't even know anymore." "I do." The words emerged, certain, clear. "You're a man who spent 100 pounds to save a stranger from humiliation. You're a brother who teases his sister even when he's breaking inside. You're a grandson who sits by a sick woman's bed for hours, not because duty requires it, but because you can't bear the thought of her waking up alone. That's who you are, Caspian. That's the man I see." The first tear slipped down his cheek. He tried to turn away, to hide, but Marin caught his hand before he could retreat. "Don't." Her voice broke on the word. "Don't hide from me. Not now." He shattered. The sobs came in waves, silent and devastating, his whole body shaking with the force of grief too long suppressed. Marin held him, her arms wrapped around his shoulders, her face pressed against his chest, anchoring him while the storm raged through. They stood like that for a long time. Minutes or hours, Marin couldn't tell. When the sobs finally subsided, Caspian pulled back just enough to look at her. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me. For staying." She reached up, brushed a tear from his cheek with her thumb. "Where else would I go?" His hand covered hers, pressing it against his face. His eyes searched hers, looking for something she wasn't sure she could give. Then, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, the kiss of a man who expected to be rejected, who was bracing for the moment she would pull away and remind him of all the reasons this was impossible. Marin didn't pull away. She leaned into him instead, her hand sliding from his cheek to the back of his neck, pulling him closer. The gentleness between them caught fire. Caspian made a sound low in his throat, half groan, half surrender. His arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly, pressing her against him like he was afraid she might disappear. She could feel his heart hammering against her chest, could taste the salt of his tears on her lips. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Hope. "This changes everything," he said, his voice rough. "I know. I'm not going to pretend anymore." His hands cupped her face, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "I don't want an arrangement, Marin. I don't want a performance. I want you. Really, you. For as long as you'll have me." Her blood rushed in her ears. "Caspian, I'm still a merchant's daughter. Your grandmother just collapsed, possibly from the stress of watching you publicly defy society for me. Lady Araminta is probably already spreading poison through every drawing room in London. This isn't a fairy tale. It can't end the way you're imagining." "Why not?" "Because fairy tales don't happen to girls like me." "Then we'll write a new story." His gaze held hers, unwavering. "One where they do." She never got the chance to answer. The library door burst open. Octavia stood in the doorway, her face flushed with joy. "She's awake. Grandmother's awake, and she's asking for you. Both of you." The dowager's chambers were warm with firelight, the heavy curtains drawn against the gray day. She looked smaller somehow, propped against pillows in her massive bed, her silver hair loose around her shoulders instead of pinned in its usual severe style. But her eyes were sharp as ever. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to chairs that had been pulled close to the bed. "Both of you, where I can see your faces." They sat. Caspian took his grandmother's hand. Marin folded hers in her lap, suddenly aware that her lips were probably swollen from kissing, that anyone looking at her would know exactly what had just happened. The dowager looked, and she knew. "I see the situation has progressed," she said dryly. "Grandmother." Caspian's voice held warning. "Don't grandmother me. I've been half dead for 3 days. I've earned the right to say what I please." Her gaze shifted to Marin. "Well, do you love him?" The directness stole Marin's breath. I don't stammer. It's unbecoming." "Yes or no, Miss Ashford? Do you love my grandson?" Marin looked at Caspian, at his exhausted face, his red-rimmed eyes, the vulnerability he'd finally allowed her to see, at the man who had saved her from humiliation, defended her against cruelty, wept in her arms. "Yes," she said. "I love him." Caspian's hand tightened on his grandmother's. His eyes never left Marin's face. "Good." The dowager settled back against her pillows. "Then we have plans to make. I am not dying. The doctors have confirmed it was merely a warning, one I intend to heed by reducing my stress considerably. Which means, Caspian, you will stop fighting me about marriage. And you, Miss Ashford, will stop pretending you're temporary. Grandmother, I haven't even proposed. You'll propose, probably dramatically, knowing you. You're your father's son in that regard." The dowager's voice softened. "Vivienne would have liked her, you know. Your mother. She would have seen what I see. A woman with spine enough to stand beside you and heart enough to understand you." Marin's eyes stung. "Your Grace. Heloise. If you're going to marry my grandson, you should call me Heloise." The dowager closed her eyes. "Now go away, both of you. I need to rest. And you need to figure out how to announce this without giving Lady Araminta the satisfaction of thinking she was right about you being a fortune hunter." They were dismissed. In the hallway outside, Caspian pulled Marin into his arms again, holding her tight against his chest. "She's going to be fine," Marin whispered. "She's going to be insufferable." But there was laughter in his voice, and relief. "She just gave us her blessing, you realize, in her own imperious way." "I noticed." Marin pulled back to look at him. "Are we really doing this? Truly?" "Truly," He kissed her forehead. "Though I would like to actually propose at some point. Properly. With a ring." "I don't need a ring. You're getting one anyway." His smile was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "But first, we have a few things to handle. Lady Araminta, your family. The small matter of announcing to all of London that our arrangement has become something else entirely. That sounds complicated. It will be." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "But we'll handle it together. Whatever comes. Together." The word wrapped around her heart like a promise. For the first time since she'd stepped onto that auction platform, Maren allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Maren was in the small morning room, reviewing the day's invitations with Octavia, when Bridget entered with a silver tray. Her face was troubled. "This came for you, miss. Hand-delivered. The messenger wouldn't say who sent it." Maren took the envelope. Her name was written across the front in elegant, unfamiliar script. She broke the seal and unfolded the single page inside. "Miss Ashford, I thought you should know what people are saying about your family. Your brother has been gambling heavily at Hargrove's establishment. Your father has been seeking loans from increasingly disreputable sources. And your mother has been seen entering a pawn shop near Cheapside, carrying what appeared to be her wedding ring. The Duke of Ashworth may have rescued you from one humiliation, but he cannot rescue your family from themselves. Eventually, the truth of what you are will come out. You are not a fairy tale princess. You are a desperate woman from a desperate family. And London will see you for exactly what you are. With sincere regards, a friend." Maren's hands were shaking by the time she finished reading. "What is it?" Octavia was at her side instantly. "Maren, you've gone white. What does it say?" She handed over the letter without a word. Octavia's expression darkened as she read. "That vicious, poisonous snake. This is Araminta's work. It has to be. It doesn't matter who sent it." Maren's voice felt distant, detached. "What matters is whether it's true." "Maren, I need to go home. I need to see my family." She was already moving toward the door. "If they're in trouble, if Dorian has been gambling, if my mother sold her ring, I need to know. Let Caspian help. He has resources, connections. This isn't his problem to solve." The words came out sharper than she intended. "My family's struggles were never part of our arrangement. I can't ask him to rescue them too." "You're not asking. He'd want to help. And that's exactly why I can't let him." Maren stopped at the doorway, her heart aching. "Don't you see? If he keeps saving me, keeps saving my family, I'll never know if I actually belong in his world, or if I'm just charity. A project. Something he fixed because he couldn't fix his own grief." Octavia's face crumpled. "You don't believe that?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." She left before Octavia could argue further. The carriage ride to Cheapside felt endless. Maren stared out the window at the familiar streets, watching the neighborhoods grow shabbier, more crowded, more like the world she'd left behind. By the time she reached her family's modest house, her stomach was in knots. Her mother opened the door. The relief on her face lasted only a moment before it transformed into worry. "Maren, what's happened? Is something wrong?" "I could ask you the same thing." Maren stepped inside, her gaze sweeping the familiar parlor. Something was different. The mantel looked bare. The silver candlesticks were gone. "Mother, where are the candlesticks? Father's father gave us those." Her mother's hand went to her throat, where her wedding ring should have hung on its chain. The chain was still there. The ring was not. "It's nothing, darling. Just some temporary difficulties. Your father, what has he done?" "Nothing." But her mother's voice cracked. "Nothing that can't be fixed. He made some investments. They didn't work out as planned. We've had to economize, that's all. Economize by selling your wedding ring? Silence. Marin sank onto the worn settee, her legs suddenly unable to support her. And Dorian? Is he gambling again? At Hargrove's? Her mother's face told her everything. He swore it was different this time. Her mother sat beside her, taking her hands. He said he had a system, a way to win back what father lost. We couldn't stop him. You know how he gets when he has an idea in his head. How much does he owe? Marin, you don't need to worry about. How much? Her mother's voice dropped to a whisper. 300 pounds. The number landed like a physical blow. 300 pounds was more than her family earned in 2 years. It was a debt they could never repay, a hole they could never climb out of. I'll fix it, Marin heard herself say. I'll find a way. How? Darling, I know you're living with wealthy people now, but you can't ask them for money. It would prove everything everyone says about you. Her mother was right. Of course she was right. If Marin went to Caspian with this, if she asked him to pay her brother's gambling debts and rescue her family from ruin, she would become exactly what Araminta accused her of being, a fortune hunter, using his affection to extract wealth. The love he thought he felt for her would curdle into suspicion. The trust they'd built would shatter, and she would never know if he'd chosen her or simply felt obligated to save her. There was only one solution. She had to leave. The decision crystallized with terrible clarity. If she left now, before things went further, Caspian could move on. Find someone suitable. Someone whose family wouldn't drag him into scandal and debt. Someone who actually belonged in his world, and she could figure out how to save her family on her own, the way she always had. I have to go, she said, standing abruptly. Mother, I'm going to fix this. I promise. Marin. Wait. But she was already out the door, climbing back into the carriage that would take her to Ashworth House one last time. She had letters to write, and a heart to break. Caspian found the letters on his desk 3 hours later. One was addressed to Octavia, thanking her for her friendship and apologizing for leaving without saying goodbye. One was addressed to the Dowager, formal and brief, expressing gratitude for her hospitality. The third was addressed to him. He opened it with hands that had started to tremble. Caspian, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Please don't try to find me. I told you once that fairy tales don't happen to girls like me. I wanted to believe I was wrong. I wanted to believe that love could be enough, that courage and feeling and the impossible thing growing between us could somehow bridge the gap between your world and mine. But I was wrong. My family is drowning. My brother owes money we can't repay. My father has lost everything. Again. And if I stay with you, if I let you rescue us, I become exactly what everyone believes I am. A desperate woman exploiting your affection for financial gain. I won't do that to you. I won't let our story become that story. You deserve someone who brings you peace, not problems. Someone whose presence in your life doesn't require you to constantly defend her against society's cruelty. Someone who can stand beside you as an equal, not as a project. I love you. I think I've loved you since you raised your hand in that auction room, since you looked at me like I was worth saving. But loving you means wanting what's best for you, even if that means walking away. Please don't come after me. Let this end cleanly. Let me become a story you tell at dinner parties. The strange girl you bid on at an auction once, who turned out to be more trouble than she was worth. Be happy, Caspian. Find someone who doesn't break your heart just by existing. Yours always, Marin Caspian read the letter 3 times. Then he crumpled it in his fist and strode out of his study, shouting for Bridget, for the carriage, for anyone who could tell him where she'd gone. Octavia intercepted him in the hallway. I already sent someone to her family's house. She's not there. They don't know where she went. Then we search every inn, every coaching house, every— Caspian. Octavia grabbed his arm. Stop. Think. If she wanted to disappear, where would she go? He forced himself to breathe, to push past the panic clawing at his chest. Where would she go? Not home, clearly. Not to friends. She'd mentioned none. Not to— the book. Songs of the Northern Hills. He'd sent it to her because she'd mentioned missing home, missing the stories her mother told. Stories from the north, from a place she'd known before London, before the shop, before everything fell apart. Where was she from? He demanded. Before London. Where did her family live? I don't know. She never said. Find out. Talk to her mother, her brother, anyone who knows. There must be records at the shop, paperwork, something. Within the hour, he had his answer. Thornwick, a village in the Northern Hills, 3 days' journey from London, the place where Marin Ashford had been born, where her mother's family still lived, where she might run if she had nowhere else to go. I'm going after her, Caspian said, already calling for his horse. The carriage would be faster, more comfortable. I don't want comfortable. I want fast. He grabbed his coat. Tell grandmother. Tell her I'll be back when I've found her. Tell her I'm doing what father would have done. Octavia's eyes glistened. Bring her home, Caspian. I intend to. He rode through the night. The roads were dark, the moon hidden behind clouds. But Caspian pushed forward anyway. He changed horses at coaching inns, ate in the saddle, slept in brief snatches when his body threatened to give out. By the time dawn broke on the second day, he was halfway to Thornwick, running on nothing but desperation and love. He found her on the third morning. She was standing at the edge of a cliff overlooking the sea, the northern wind whipping her hair into tangles, her shoulders hunched against the cold. She looked small against the vastness of sky and water, small and alone and utterly beautiful. You shouldn't have come. She didn't turn around. Somehow, she'd known he was there. You didn't actually think I'd let you go that easily. He dismounted, his legs nearly buckling from exhaustion. You should know me better by now. I know you well enough to know you'll regret this. Her voice was flat. I have nothing to offer you, Caspian. My family is ruined. My brother owes money to dangerous people. Coming after me only makes everything more complicated. Then let it be complicated. He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the gray, churning sea. I don't want simple. I don't want easy. I want you. You want the idea of me, the brave girl who stood up to Araminta, who made you feel things again. But that's not who I am. I'm just someone who's been barely surviving for so long that I forgot what living looked like. Then let me remind you. She turned at last, and he saw the tears streaming down her face. How? How do you remind someone how to live when their whole family is drowning? By helping them swim. He took her hands, cold and trembling in his warm grip. Your brother's debts are paid. I handled it before I left London. She stared at him. What? Octavia found out the details from your mother. Hargrove's establishment. £300. It's settled. You can't just— I can. I did. His voice was fierce. And before you tell me that makes you a charity case, before you twist this into proof that you're not worthy of me, listen to what I'm actually saying. I didn't do this to buy you, Marin. I did it because I love you. Because when you love someone, their problems become your problems. Their family becomes your family. That's what love means. Love means drowning together. Love means learning to swim together. He pulled her closer. I'm not rescuing you. I'm choosing you. There's a difference. The fight drained out of her, all at once, like water from a broken vessel. She collapsed against his chest, sobbing, and he held her the way he'd held her in the library. Tight, unbreakable, refusing to let go. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm sorry I ran. I was so scared. I know. I thought if I loved you, I had to protect you from me. That's not how this works." He tipped her face up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You protect each other. You face things together. You don't get to decide what's best for me and then disappear. That's not love. That's cowardice." She laughed, a broken sound. "Did you just call me a coward? If the shoe fits." But he was smiling. "Come home, Maren. Come home and let me love you properly. Let me introduce you to society as the woman I intend to marry. Let me show them all that you're not a scandal or a charity project or a fortune hunter. You're the woman who changed everything. What if they don't accept me? Then they lose the privilege of our company." He kissed her forehead. "I choose you, Maren, over society, over expectations, over everything. Now stop running and choose me back." She looked up at him, this impossible man who had ridden 3 days through darkness to find her, who had paid her brother's debts without being asked, who looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever had. "I choose you," she whispered. "I choose you, Caspian, for everything. For always." He kissed her then, properly, the way he'd wanted to since that night at the Whitmore ball. And when they finally broke apart, the sun was breaking through the clouds, painting the sea gold. "Come on," he said, taking her hand. "We have a long ride back to London, and I believe I owe you a proper proposal." The auction house was different in daylight. Maren stood outside Lord Pemberton's estate, the same estate where she'd been humiliated a month ago, and marveled at how much had changed. The gardens looked peaceful now, the windows gleaming benignly in the afternoon sun. It was hard to believe this was the place where her life had transformed. "Are you certain about this?" Caspian stood beside her, his hand warm at the small of her back. "We don't have to do it here. We could announce our engagement anywhere." "It has to be here." Maren's voice was steady. "This is where it started. This should be where it ends." The Season's End Charity Gala was Lady Pemberton's annual tradition, a grand affair marking the close of the social season, with an auction of donated items to benefit orphanages throughout London. The irony was not lost on Maren. Neither was the fact that Lady Araminta Blackmore would be in attendance. They entered together, and the whispers began immediately. But this time, Maren didn't shrink from them. She walked with her head high and her shoulders back, wearing a gown of deep gold that caught the light like fire. Caspian was beside her, and Octavia walked just behind, practically bouncing with anticipation. Even the dowager had come, carried in a sedan chair, and deposited near the refreshments, where she could observe everything without exerting herself. "They're all staring," Octavia murmured gleefully. "Araminta looks like she swallowed a live eel." Lady Araminta did indeed look unwell. She stood near the far wall, surrounded by a smaller group of companions than usual, her face pale beneath her powder. The whispers about her had started weeks ago, that she'd orchestrated the humiliating auction, that she'd been publicly dismissed by the Duke of Ashworth, that her influence was waning. Now, watching Maren enter on that same Duke's arm, she looked like a woman watching her own funeral procession. "Later," Maren said quietly. "Let her wait." The evening proceeded with elegant precision. Lord Pemberton welcomed his guests. The orchestra played, champagne flowed, and when the charity auction began, Maren took her place near the front, exactly where she could be seen. "This time, many of you were present at a gathering held in this very room several weeks ago," he began, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. "A gathering during which a young woman was placed on this platform and subjected to a mockery disguised as entertainment." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several faces turned toward Araminta, who had gone dead white. "I intervened that evening because I could not stand by while cruelty masqueraded as humor, I did not know Miss Marin Ashford when I raised my hand. I knew only that she was being treated with a callousness that should shame every person who participated or watched in silence. Marin stood frozen, her breath stolen, her limbs refusing to obey. She could only watch as the man she loved addressed a room full of people who had laughed at her. Since that night, I have come to know Miss Ashford well. I have discovered that she possesses more courage, more integrity, and more genuine worth than most of the so-called nobility in this room. She is not a fortune hunter or a social climber or any of the other epithets that have been whispered behind fans. She is the woman I love. The silence was absolute. And I would be honored beyond measure, Caspian continued, descending from the platform and crossing to where Marin stood frozen, if she would consent to become my wife. He dropped to one knee. The ballroom erupted. Marin looked down at him through a blur of tears, at this impossible man who had just declared his love before the very people who had mocked her, who had turned her humiliation into a triumph she never could have imagined. "You're proposing here," she whispered, "in front of everyone." "I'm proposing here," he confirmed, "so that no one can ever question what you mean to me. So that every whisper and rumor dies tonight, replaced by the truth. I choose you, Marin Ashford. In front of God and society and Lady Araminta Blackmore, I choose you." Somewhere near the far wall, she heard a strangled sound that might have been Araminta choking. "Well?" Caspian's eyes sparkled with mischief, despite the magnitude of the moment. "Don't leave me kneeling here forever. My grandmother says it's undignified for a duke." Marin laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Yes." "Yes?" "Yes, you ridiculous man. 1,000 times, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. Then he rose and kissed her. Right there in the middle of the ballroom, in front of everyone who had ever doubted she belonged. The applause that followed was thunderous. Later, after the congratulations and the champagne and Octavia's tearful embraces, Marin found herself standing beside the dowager's chair. "You planned this," she said quietly. "The proposal, the speech, you knew he was going to do it here." "I suggested it." The dowager's voice was dry, but her eyes were warm. "This room saw your humiliation. It was only fitting that it witness your vindication." "And Araminta?" They both looked toward the corner where Lady Araminta had stood. The space was empty now. She had slipped out sometime during the proposal, her face a mask of defeat. "She'll survive," the dowager said. "Her kind always does. But she'll think twice before targeting someone under Ashworth protection again." Marin nodded slowly. It wasn't perfect justice. Araminta would face no formal consequences, no public punishment. But she had been humiliated by her own failure, forced to watch as the woman she'd tried to destroy rose to heights Araminta herself would never reach. Some victories were quiet, but they were victories nonetheless. "Thank you," Marin said, "for accepting me, for helping me become someone who deserves this." The dowager reached out and took her hand, a gesture so unexpected that Marin nearly wept. "You always deserved it," Heloise said. "You simply needed someone to see it. My grandson has excellent taste, just like his father." 1 year later, the Ashworth charity auction was becoming a cherished new tradition. Marin stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching as items were bid upon with genuine enthusiasm. The proceeds would fund scholarships for merchants' children, a program she'd designed herself, helping young people from modest backgrounds access education and opportunity. A warm hand settled on her waist. "You're hiding," Caspian murmured against her ear. "I'm observing. There's a difference. You told me that once before." He turned her to face him. right before you made me fall hopelessly in love with you. I seem to recall you doing most of the falling on your own. True. But you caught me. He kissed her forehead. How are you feeling? Should you sit down? Marin placed her hand over the gentle swell of her belly, only just beginning to show beneath her amber gown. I'm fine. Better than fine. I'm perfect. Across the room, Octavia was holding court with a circle of young lords, all of them competing for her attention. The dowager watched from her customary chair, offering cutting commentary to anyone brave enough to approach. And near the entrance, Marin's mother and father were speaking with Lord and Lady Pemberton, looking more comfortable among society than they ever had before. Dorian had found work as a clerk in Caspian's shipping enterprise, channeling his restless energy into legitimate commerce. He'd even begun courting a respectable young woman from Kent, much to their mother's delight. And Bridget, now Marin's personal lady's maid, had been spotted in the gardens with one of the Ashworth footmen, both of them wearing matching blushes. Happy endings everywhere I look, Marin said softly. Is this a happy ending? Caspian's arms tightened around her. I was rather hoping it was a happy beginning. She leaned back against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady against her spine. A year ago, she had been a merchant's daughter, facing humiliation on an auction platform. Now she was the Duchess of Ashworth, surrounded by family and friends, carrying a child who would never know the fear of poverty or the sting of cruelty. The journey between those two moments had been terrifying, painful, and beautiful beyond measure. You know, she said, I never thanked you properly. For what? For raising your hand that night, for seeing something worth saving when everyone else saw a joke. Caspian turned her to face him, his expression serious. You were never a joke, Marin. You were a revelation. The moment I saw you standing on that platform, refusing to crumble, I knew my life was about to change. I just didn't know how much. And now? Now I know exactly how much. He kissed her, soft and sweet, a promise renewed. And I would do it again, 1,000 times, 1,000,000. Every choice that led me to you was the right choice. The auction continued around them, voices rising in bids and laughter. Somewhere, Octavia was telling an outrageous story. The dowager was critiquing someone's fashion choices. The orchestra was playing a waltz that Marin recognized from the Whitmore ball. But in that moment, none of it mattered. There was only Caspian, and the child growing beneath her heart, and the certain knowledge that she had found her place in the world. Not through birth, or wealth, or social standing. Through courage. Through love. Through the refusal to be less than she was. And that was worth more than any title could ever be. Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories exist, because you believe in love that chooses courage over convenience, in characters who fight for happiness despite the odds, in endings that feel earned and true. Your presence makes this space warm and welcoming, and I'm grateful for every moment you spend with these characters. Do you have a favorite line or scene? Your engagement helps me understand what moves you, what keeps you listening, and what kinds of stories to create next. Consider subscribing if you'd like more romances with emotional depth and genuine character growth. Thank you for being here. You make this community what it is.